Why do people always say that you don't have to be rich to travel? It all comes down to your priorities. If you want to backpack and stay in hostels, you can see the world on 20-day. But if you want a nice hotel, clean sheets, a comfy plane ride, etc., it can easily be over 1,000-day. Plan and save for a trip over the course of a year or two. Find the budget options. Exploit deals. I just traveled to Japan with a credit card reward ticket timed, opening the card with a big expense to meet the bonus requirements. Hotels can be found easily for under $50 night even in the most expensive city of Tokyo, less elsewhere. Trains are a couple bucks per trip. Eating out is under 10 person, or you can go cheap at a convenience store. One hotel even had included food served in the lobby all day. The expensive parts of my trip were optional. Took the bullet train to Osaka 200 round trip and rented a sports car for 2 days 300 at work, so all in with gas and tolls. Even with those included, the whole thing was around about 500 for 2 weeks. Keep in mind some of those costs would have been incurred back home anyway, like food and gas. I don't think people outside of the US realize how genuinely expensive it is to leave the country in general. Just a plane ticket from one side of the country to the other is over 500, let alone if you want to fly overseas. I got a remote job and travel led to 30 countries from 2019 to 2023. My secret? I didn't live anywhere, so my former rent budget was my travel budget. I guess it depends on your definition of rich. As a kid fresh out of high school, yeah, there's no way I would have been able to afford that. Now, as an adult with a real job and many years of experience in my field, it's no big deal to take a nice trip once or twice a year, although I still wouldn't consider myself rich. I'm not rich by any means. I think I'm median income for my city. I make enough money and vacation to be able to take one overseas trip a year if I want to. I could easily do 2 or 3 weeks at a time once a year. Sure, I might have to buy hotels and flights over 4 or 5 months or whatever, but I mean that's pretty normal. I feel like I'm also single with no kids or pets. Some people are comfortable taking the budget option for everything, and then it also depends on priorities too. My cousin is going to Asia until he literally runs out of money. For me, at his age, it was more important to build my career and investments so that I could stuff for the rest of my life as opposed to just in my 20s. You don't have to be rich, but you have to have some disposable income and holiday entitlement. Because you don't need to be. Most people who work a full-time job or earn a decent salary can save to travel. That doesn't mean traveling is cheap, it isn't, but it isn't reserved for the upper classes. You don't have to be rich, you just have to have a spare couple of grand, haha. Most people can only afford to travel a few times a year at most. The people traveling all over the world are definitely a lot richer than the average person. For the rest of us, it takes a lot more planning and saving towards the few vacations we get to take. 1. People think rich means anyone with slightly more money than them. Middle-income Westerners can typically afford travel. 2. They are only considering over THR top international type travel. 3. Depending on where you live, the prices can vary a lot. Venice, Italy is a long weekend trip if you live in Germany. If you live in Arizona, it could be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Traveling across the country usually costs me $2,000. I can't afford that most of the time. I've traveled to over 50 countries, go abroad a few times a year, and recently spent less than $500 on my last trip to Europe for a week, inclusive of tickets. The trick is to get airline credit cards, downgrade them after the first free year, then spend the required $3,000 in 3 months on gift cards for places like Costco and Walmart that you use. 60,000 miles is enough for 2-3 one-way flights to from Europe and South America. I get my own place, just not 3 stars or anything. I'm poorer than poor and I travel quite a lot actually. I'm 18 and me and my partner both work around minimum wage and we're both trying to travel all the UK. You don't have to be rich to travel, but Jesus Christ, is it such a hassle when you're not. I think it's more of a you don't have to fly first class or stay in a 5-star hotel to travel kind of vibe. You wait until you can find a dirt cheap flight or train and go to hostels or go camping. Obviously it still requires money, but you can do it pretty cheap if you lowers your standards. Lol, a friend of mine was that type of traveler. Always somewhere and always fairly inexpensive, but it's because he would just go whenever the inexpensive opportunity presented itself or planned it a year ahead and saved for it. He slept in hostels and took trains instead of flights or rented a car. When he did fly, he'd try to find the cheapest flights he could and would add multiple layovers to get the cost down further. One year he even took a job as an au pair, so he was making some money while he was overseas and got to tour around and sightsee on his days off. He went to cheap hole-in-the-wall hostels and dive restaurants or little grocery stores. One of the main things I've noticed watching people travel is to stay far away from tourist areas. It looks exhausting and dangerous in some countries, but he's been a lot of cool places also. Depending on where you go, the cost of living, aka food and lodging, is way cheaper than North America. Between a rich person, at least a millionaire, and a very poor person living from paycheck to paycheck, there are different levels of income and lifestyle. People say this because they are rich, and then spend less to travel than they would at home, thus concluding that that's how the poor live. Of course, they are wrong. My wife and I did 6 weeks in Southeast Asia, 4 countries, on 30 a day in 2018. It was awesome. Flights were about 1K each way. It was very affordable with some planning. The whole world? Yeah, that's pretty expensive.